After months of simmering conflict, thousands of Russian troops have massed on the border of Ukraine. It is the largest buildup of troops since Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014. Amna is back now with that.
Russia-backed separatists have been fighting against Ukrainian forces since 2014. But this year, Ukraine says Russia's gathered nearly 80,000 troops at its border. Russia's deployed troops in Russian-annexed Crimea in the south and along the border with Ukraine's Donbas region in the east. Now, the Russian government says it's a reaction to what it claimed are NATO plans to push troops closer to Russia's borders. During a meeting with his Ukrainian counterpart today, Secretary of State Antony Blinken voiced his support.
The United States stands firmly behind the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, and I'm here to reaffirm that with the foreign minister today. And that's particularly important at a time when we're seeing, unfortunately, Russia take very provocative actions when it comes to Ukraine.
President Biden also spoke today with Russian President Vladimir Putin to press that message. Joining me now to discuss what all of this means is former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Bill Taylor. Ambassador Taylor, welcome back to the NewsHour, and thank you for making the time. Let me just start with what your understanding is of what's driving this escalation right now, and in particular, Russia's framing of it.
So, Anna, this is a hard question to answer because no one can get inside the head of Mr. Putin. No one understands his motivations. He surprised the world when he invaded his neighbor, as you indicated earlier, in 2014. So it's hard to say. It's clearly not what he put out in terms of NATO pushing toward the Russian border. That's just ludicrous. There may be some concern on Mr. Putin's part that his popularity, his support among Russians is declining, and he needs some way to boost that. He also may be trying to put pressure on Ukraine, and that's clearly happening. Ukraine is standing up to it, as you have indicated. He may also be trying to put some pressure on the new Biden administration, just to put them to a test early on. But as I say, it's hard to see. There's nothing that would have prompted this from the Ukrainian side.
In trying to unpack again why we are at this moment, I wanted to ask you about what we've been seeing inside Ukraine. Has there been actions from President Zelensky there that could also have provoked President Putin to take this kind of escalation right now?
President Zelensky has been pushing back against Russian-oriented Ukrainians, and in particular Russian-oriented Ukrainian oligarchs. And he has also pushed back and closed down some Russian TV stations, 3 TV stations that broadcast disinformation from the Kremlin. So he has pushed back. The other thing he has done, the President Zelensky has done, is made it clear his intent, which is in the Ukrainian constitution, to move toward NATO, toward the European Union, and indeed toward NATO membership. This is troubling, undoubtedly, for the Russians, but this is the sovereign right of a country to make its decisions.
Let me ask you about the U.S. approach to all of this, because for years, Ukraine has had unwavering bipartisan support from the U.S. when it comes to that conflict with Russia. That shifted during the Trump administration, right? Did those 4 years help lead to this moment?
It's a very good question. So it shifted to some degree over the past 4 years, but only at the very top of the U.S. administration. It was only the very top of the Trump administration where there was any question about the support for Ukraine. The State Department and the Defense Department and the National Security Council and the Congress, as you've indicated, on a bipartisan basis, they continued to support Ukraine. And it was just this weird dichotomy between most of the government and the very top. So yes, that did confuse people, and that could have left some question in people's mind, whether it was in Ukraine or in Russia, as to how firmly the United States would support. I think the new administration has made it clear that they, as you just indicated, unwaveringly support Ukraine's sovereignty.
So, Ambassador Taylor, we heard Secretary Blinken there say that the U.S. stands with Ukraine. President Biden reiterated that in his call with President Putin. But in your view, how far should that support extend? I mean, should U.S. forces be willing to put their lives on the line for this conflict?
I don't think the Ukrainians are interested in having U.S. forces U.S. combat forces on their territory. sure that the indications of support from the United States in terms of naval forces, which are moving toward the Black Sea, in terms of overflights to be able to identify the kinds of movements that the Russians are undertaking right now. The other thing that we should be doing and moving forward is coordinating with our European allies for those increased sanctions. If the Russians know that more severe sanctions are already cooked, are already worked out between the Americans and the Europeans, that could also act as a deterrent. It's the deterring military action that we need to do. It's not with U.S. combat forces. It is with diplomacy. It's with security assistance, and it's with economic threats.
Bill Taylor, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. Ambassador Taylor, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.